Lisa Martinez sat in her captain's chair aboard the human research ship Aurora. The stars outside her window looked peaceful, but she knew that peace was fragile. Earth had been part of the Galactic Empire for 15 years now, and those years had not been kind to humanity. The communication system beeped, interrupting her thoughts. Her tactical officer Jake Patterson looked up from his station with concern. "Commander, we're getting a priority transmission from the Empire's High Council. The signal is coming from their capital world." Lisa felt her stomach tighten. The High Council never contacted human ships directly. When they needed something from Earth, they usually sent orders through their local governors. A direct message meant either very good news or very bad news. Given humanity's position in the Empire, Lisa doubted it was good news. "Put it through to the main screen," she said, straightening in her chair. The screen flickered to life, showing a massive reptilian creature with golden scales and burning red eyes. Lisa recognized him immediately as Ambassador Vextar, one of the most powerful Draconians in the Empire's government. His species had been among the first to join the Empire, and they held positions of authority throughout the galaxy. "Commander Martinez of the primitive vessel Aurora," Vextar began, his voice deep and filled with contempt. "The High Council has decided to extend a rare honor to your species." Lisa kept her face neutral, though she noticed how he called her ship primitive. The Aurora was actually one of humanity's most advanced vessels, but compared to Empire technology, it might as well have been made of stone and wood. "The grand tournament approaches," Vextar continued. "Every 50 years, the Empire holds this sacred competition to determine the proper order of species within our great civilization. Each member species may send one warrior to represent their people in combat." Lisa's heart began to race. She had heard of the grand tournament in whispered conversations among human military personnel. It was said to be a bloodbath where the Empire's strongest warriors fought to determine which species deserved respect and which deserved servitude. "Humanity has been chosen to participate," Vextar said with what might have been a smile on his reptilian face. "The High Council believes it is time for your species to show the galaxy what you are truly capable of." Lisa knew this was not an honor. This was a setup. Humanity was at the bottom of the Empire's hierarchy, considered barely above animals by most alien species. They were forced to work in dangerous mines, clean waste facilities, and perform other jobs that no one else wanted. The invitation to the tournament was clearly meant to humiliate them in front of the entire galaxy. "We accept," Lisa said without hesitation. Behind her, she heard Jake Patterson make a small sound of protest. Her science officer, Maria Santos, turned in her chair with wide eyes. They both knew what this meant. Whoever went to represent humanity would likely die in the arena, and their death would be broadcast across the galaxy as entertainment. Vextar's eyes narrowed with surprise. He had clearly expected the humans to make excuses or try to decline. "Very well. A tournament will be held on Nexus Prime in 30 standard days. Your representative will compete against the finest warriors from across the Empire. I trust you understand the consequences of poor performance." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Lisa stared at the blank screen, her mind racing. She had just committed humanity to a fight they could not win, against opponents who could crush them without effort. "Commander," Jake said quietly, "with respect, have you lost your mind? The last time a weak species entered the tournament, their entire world was enslaved." Lisa turned to face her crew. These were good people who had served with her for years. They deserved to know the truth about what she was thinking. "We're already enslaved," she said simply. "Humans work in their mines until we die. Our children are taken from us to serve in their factories. Our brightest minds are forced to solve their problems while getting no credit. We live at the bottom of their society because they think we're weak. Maria Santos nodded slowly. But this tournament, the warriors who compete are legends. They've trained their entire lives for combat. They have weapons that can destroy cities. Maybe, Lisa said. But they've never fought a human before. They don't know what we're capable of because they've never bothered to find out. They see us as weak because we don't have their technology or their size. But there are other kinds of strength. Lisa thought about her grandmother, who had taught her the old ways of fighting that had been passed down through generations. Ancient arts that had been developed over thousands of years of human warfare. The aliens had advanced technology, but they had never faced an enemy who could adapt and improvise the way humans could. I'll represent humanity, Lisa said. I know. It sounds crazy, but I have a plan. Jake Patterson shook his head. Commander, I've seen you fight in training. You're good, but these alien warriors are something else entirely. They have psychic powers, energy weapons that can melt steel, and some of them are 10 feet tall. Then I'll have to be better than good, Lisa replied. I'll have to be something they've never seen before. The next few days passed quickly as the Aurora traveled toward Nexus Prime. Lisa spent most of her time in the ship's small training room, practicing the martial arts her grandmother had taught her as a child. The movements felt strange after so many years of using modern weapons. But muscle memory began to return. She also spent time in the ship's workshop, working on a special project. In her personal quarters, she had kept a sword that had belonged to her great-grandfather. It was a katana, forged in the old Japanese style with folded steel. The weapon was over 200 years old, but it had been maintained perfectly throughout. The generations. Lisa carefully sharpened the blade and adjusted the handle wrapping. The sword felt alive in her hands, as if it remembered the battles it had fought in the past. She knew that bringing such a primitive weapon to a tournament filled with energy shields and plasma cannons seemed foolish, but something deep inside told her it was the right choice. Maria Santos found her in the workshop on the final day before they reached Nexus Prime. Are you really going to use that old sword? She asked. Lisa held the katana up to the light, watching the steel gleam. My great-grandfather carried this blade through 3 wars. My grandmother used it to defend our family during the food riots. It's not just a weapon, Maria. It's a piece of human history. But the other warriors will have force fields and energy weapons, Maria protested. Good, Lisa said with a small smile. Then they'll underestimate me. They'll think I'm just another primitive human with a piece of old metal. By the time they realize their mistake, it will be too late. As the Aurora approached Nexus Prime, Lisa stood at the observation deck, watching the massive planet grow larger. The capital world of the Galactic Empire was a sight to behold, with cities that stretched from pole to pole and space stations that orbited like metal moons. She was about to walk into the heart of a civilization that saw humanity as nothing, more than useful animals. She would face warriors who had trained their entire lives for combat, beings with powers that defied understanding. The odds of survival were almost zero, but Lisa Martinez had something that no alien warrior possessed. She had the accumulated knowledge of human warfare, the adaptability of her species, and the desperate courage of someone who had nothing left to lose. Most importantly, she had a blade that had tasted victory before. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you underestimated humanity. The shuttle carrying Lisa Martinez descended through the clouds of Nexus Prime, and she pressed her face to the window in amazement. The capital world of the Galactic Empire was unlike anything she had ever seen. Towers of crystal and metal stretched up into the sky, some so tall they disappeared into the clouds above. Flying vehicles moved between the buildings like schools of fish, carrying beings from hundreds of different worlds. The streets below were filled with creatures that seemed to come from every nightmare and dreamed humanity had ever imagined. There were beings made of living rock, walking beside creatures that looked like floating jellyfish. Insect-like aliens with multiple arms carried on conversations with shapeless blobs that communicated through changing colors. Lisa's shuttle landed at a small docking facility far from the main ports. She had expected this treatment. Humans were given the bare minimum of everything in the Empire, from living quarters to transportation. As she stepped off the shuttle, carrying only a small bag and her sword, she was met by a bored-looking alien. "Official. Human representative," the official said without looking up from his electronic tablet. "You are assigned to quarters in Section 7, Level 3. These are temporary accommodations for tournament participants of limited status." Lisa followed the official through corridors that grew smaller and dirtier as they walked. The walls were covered with alien writing that she could not read, but she recognized the universal symbols for waste disposal and maintenance areas. They were housing her in the servant quarters. Her room was tiny, barely large enough for a bed and a small table. There was no window, and the air recycling system made a constant humming noise. Lisa set down her bag and looked around. She had stayed in worse places during her military service, but the message was clear. The Empire wanted her to know exactly how little they thought of humanity. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Lisa opened it to find a tall, thin alien with blue skin and forearms. Unlike the rude official who had brought her here, this being seemed nervous and kept looking around as if afraid of being watched. "Commander Martinez," the alien said in a whisper. "My name is Keeper Zenth. I maintain the tournament records. I wanted to meet you before the opening ceremony." Lisa studied the creature's face. "Why?" "Because I have been keeping records of these tournaments for over 200 years, Zenth said. "I have seen many species enter with confidence, only to be destroyed in the arena. But I have also seen a few surprises. Species that everyone expected to fail, but found ways to survive." "Are you trying to give me advice?" Lisa asked. Zenth glanced around nervously again. "I cannot offer direct help. That would be against the rules, but I can tell you that the other participants have been studying human military records for weeks. They think they understand your species' capabilities." "What did they find?" "Violence," Zenth said simply. "Humans have been at war with each other for most of their history. The other warriors see this as proof that you are savage and undisciplined. They believe you will be easy to defeat because you lack their advanced training and technology." Lisa nodded. This was exactly what she had hoped for. "They're studying our wars, but they're not understanding what they're seeing." "Perhaps," Zenth sighed, "but be careful, Commander. Some of these warriors have never lost a fight. They come from species that have conquered entire star systems. Your courage is admirable, but courage alone will not be enough." The alien keeper left as quietly as he had come, leaving Lisa alone with her thoughts. She spent the rest of the day exploring the tournament facility, learning the layout and observing the other participants. What she saw was both terrifying and encouraging. The other warriors were indeed impressive. She watched a massive creature called Koreth the Destroyer practice with weapons that could slice through solid metal. His people, the Bruthen, were known throughout the galaxy as unstoppable conquerors. Koreth stood nearly 10 feet tall, with muscles that looked like they could crush a human without effort. In another training area, she observed Zarathul of the Mentari Collective. The psychic warrior was practicing mental combat, lifting heavy objects with her mind and crushing them into dust. Her species could kill opponents with thought alone, without ever touching a physical weapon. The most disturbing was Hive Queen Zeshka, an insectoid being who controlled dozens of drone warriors with perfect coordination. Her species fought as one mind, making them nearly impossible to defeat in battle because they could predict and counter any strategy. But as Lisa watched these impressive displays of power, she began to notice something important. Each species fought in predictable patterns. The Bruthen relied on overwhelming force. The Mentari used their psychic abilities in standard formations. The Hive Queen's drones moved in coordinated but rigid patterns. They were all incredibly skilled. But they were also locked into fighting styles that had been developed over thousands of years. They had become so specialized that they could not adapt to unexpected tactics. Lisa found herself thinking about her grandmother's teachings. The old woman had survived the food riots of 2157 by combining different martial arts in ways that no one expected. She had taken techniques from karate, aikido, and street fighting, blending them into something new and unpredictable. The opening ceremony took place in the Grand Colosseum, a massive arena that could hold millions of spectators. Lisa had never seen so many alien beings gathered in one place. The crowd was a sea of strange shapes and colors, with beings that ranged from humanoid to completely bizarre. Supreme Chancellor Theron appeared on a platform high above the arena floor. He was a member of the Eternal Council, being so old and powerful that they were considered almost godlike by the younger species. His voice boomed across the Colosseum without any visible amplification. "Citizens of the Empire," Theron began, "we gather once again to witness the grand tournament. This sacred competition maintains the natural order of our civilization, ensuring that each species knows its proper place in the galaxy." The crowd cheered, but Lisa noticed that the cheering was loudest from the sections where the dominant species sat. The areas filled with members of servant species were much quieter. "This year, we have a special participant," Theron continued, and Lisa felt her heart sink. "The primitive humans have sent a representative to compete against our finest warriors." The camera screens around the arena focused on Lisa, and she heard laughter ripple through the crowd. She stood as tall as she could, trying to project confidence. She did not feel. Next to the other participants, she looked tiny and fragile. "The human will face Gorthmak of the volcanic worlds in the first round," Theron announced. "Let us see how long primitive steel can stand against the fires of a true warrior." More laughter filled the arena as a massive figure stepped forward. Gorthmak was even more intimidating up close than Lisa had imagined. His skin looked like cooling lava, and heat waves shimmered around his body. His weapon was a plasma whip that could extend hundreds of feet and cut through starship armor. Lisa touched the katana at her side. The ancient steel felt cool against her hand, a sharp contrast to the heat radiating from her opponent. She thought about all the human warriors who had carried similar blades into battle over the centuries. They had faced overwhelming odds before and found ways to win. As the ceremony continued, Lisa noticed something that gave her hope. In the servant sections of the arena, members of the lesser species were watching her with interest rather than amusement. They were not laughing at the human warrior. They were hoping she might succeed. An old alien janitor approached her as she left the ceremony. His species looked like walking trees, with bark-like skin and leaves instead of hair. He spoke in a whisper so quiet that Lisa had to lean close to hear him. "Young warrior," he said, "my people have been slaves to the Empire for 300 years. We have watched many tournaments, always hoping someone would challenge the established order. You are small, but there is something in your eyes that the others do not have." "What do you mean?" Lisa asked. "The great warriors fight for glory and honor," the tree-like being replied. "They fight to prove their superiority. But you fight for something else. You fight for those who cannot fight for themselves." Lisa looked around at the various servant species, cleaning up after the ceremony. They moved quietly and efficiently, invisible to the dominant species around them. These were the beings who kept the Empire running, who did the dangerous and dirty work that no one else wanted to do. "If I win," Lisa said quietly, what happens to the order of things? That depends on how much you can win, the janitor replied. But even one victory would be enough to give others hope. Hope is a powerful weapon, young human. Sometimes it is the only weapon the oppressed have. As Lisa returned to her small quarters, she understood the true stakes of the tournament. This was not just about humanity's place in the Empire. This was about whether the established order could be challenged, whether the lesser species had. To accept their fate forever, Lisa knelt beside her bed and carefully removed her katana from its scabbard. The blade gleamed in the artificial light, its edge sharp enough to cut through anything. Her great-grandfather had carried this sword through impossible battles and emerged victorious. Now it was her turn to prove that home. The arena floor was made of some kind of metal that could withstand the most powerful weapons in the galaxy. Lisa stood at one end, looking across the vast space at her opponent. Gorthmak waited at the other end, his massive form radiating heat. That made the air shimmer like a desert mirage. The crowd in the stands was enormous. Millions of beings from across the Empire had come to watch the tournament, and their voices created a constant roar of excitement and anticipation. Lisa could hear the betting odds being announced in dozens of languages. The numbers were not in her favor. 10,000 to 1 against the human, came one announcement. Place your bets now on how long the primitive warrior will survive. Lisa tried to block out the noise and focus on her opponent. Gorthmak was practicing with his plasma whip, making it crack through the air with sounds like thunder. Each strike left glowing marks on the arena floor where the superheated energy had touched the metal. She had spent the morning preparing in the traditional way her grandmother had taught her. Meditation to calm her mind, stretching to prepare. Her body and careful inspection of her weapon. The katana felt perfect in her hands, balanced and sharp. It was strange to think that this simple piece of steel might be the key to humanity's future. Supreme, Chancellor Theron's voice boomed across the arena. Citizens of the Empire witnessed the first match of the grand tournament. Gorthmak of the volcanic worlds, champion of 100 battles, faces the human Lisa Martinez. The crowd erupted in cheers for Gorthmak and laughter for Lisa. She had expected this reaction, but it still stung. These beings saw her as nothing more than entertainment, a brief amusement before the real competition began. A force field barrier rose around the arena floor, protecting the spectators from the weapons that would be used. Lisa noticed that the barrier was designed to contain plasma blasts and energy weapons, but she wondered if it would stop everything that might happen in the fight. Begin, Theron commanded. Gorthmak moved immediately, his plasma whip extending toward Lisa with a crack of energy. The weapon stretched across half the arena, moving faster than most beings could react. The crowd gasped with excitement, expecting to see the human warrior cut down in the first seconds of the fight. But Lisa was not there when the whip arrived. She had moved the instant the fight began, flowing to the side like water around a stone. The plasma whip struck the arena floor where she had been standing, leaving a glowing scar in the metal. Gorthmak's eyes widened with surprise. He had never faced an opponent who could move so quickly and smoothly. His people were powerful warriors, but they relied on strength and direct attacks. This human moved in a way that seemed almost liquid. Lisa continued moving, never stopping in one place long enough for the plasma whip to find her. She was using footwork techniques that combined Aikido with modern combat training, staying light on her feet while maintaining perfect balance. Her grandmother had taught her that the key to fighting a stronger opponent was to never let them use their strength against you. The crowd's laughter began to change to confused murmuring. The human was supposed to be dead by now, but instead, she was making the mighty Gorthmak look clumsy and slow. His plasma whip cracked through the air again and again, but it never found its target. Lisa began to close the distance between them, moving in a spiral pattern that made it difficult for Gorthnak to predict where she would be next. She could feel the heat radiating from his body, growing stronger as she got closer. But she ignored the discomfort and focused on her movements. When she was finally close enough, Lisa drew her katana in one smooth motion. The blade caught the arena lights and seemed to glow with its own inner fire. For a moment, the crowd fell silent, mesmerized by the simple beauty of the ancient weapon. Gorthnak swung his plasma whip directly at Lisa's head, a strike that should have ended the fight instantly. But Lisa was ready. She moved her katana in a precise arc, and something impossible happened. The blade cut through the energy beam, slicing the plasma whip in half. The crowd gasped in shock. Energy weapons were not supposed to be vulnerable to physical attacks. But Lisa's katana was not ordinary steel. It had been forged using techniques that were thousands of years old, folded and refolded until the metal had properties that even the Empire's scientists did not understand. Gorthnak stared at his broken weapon in confusion. He had never seen anything like this before. His people had always relied on superior technology and overwhelming force. The idea that a primitive blade could cut through advanced energy weapons was beyond his understanding. Lisa did not give him time to recover. She moved forward, her katana singing through the air in a pattern that seemed to flow like a dance. She was using techniques that her great-grandfather had learned from masters who had perfected their art over centuries of warfare. The blade struck Gorthnak's heated skin, and another impossible thing happened. The katana did not melt or break against his volcanic hide. Instead, it cut through his natural armor as if it were paper. The warrior from the volcanic worlds cried out in pain and surprise. Stumbling backward, Lisa pressed her advantage, moving with speed and precision that amazed the watching crowd. She was not just fighting with her sword. She was fighting with her entire body, using every technique her grandmother had taught her. Her movements flowed from karate to aikido to techniques that had been developed in the back alleys of Earth's toughest cities. Gorthnak tried to grab her with his massive hands, but Lisa slipped away from his grasp like smoke. She struck again and again, each cut precise and devastating. The volcanic warrior's confidence began to crumble as he realized that his strength meant nothing against an opponent he could not touch. The crowd was no longer laughing. They were watching in stunned silence as the human warrior demonstrated skills that none of them had ever seen before. The betting odds began to shift as spectators realized that the impossible might actually be happening. Lisa's final strike was a move that her grandmother had called the lightning cut. It was a technique that required perfect timing and absolute precision. She feinted to the left, causing Gorthnak to turn to block her, then spun to the right and struck with her katana in a movement too fast for the eye to follow. The blade found the one weak point in Gorthnak's armor, a spot just below. His throat where the volcanic skin was thinner. The katana pierced through, and the mighty warrior from the volcanic worlds fell to his knees. Defeated, the arena was completely silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, sound began to return. First came scattered applause from the servant sections, then confused murmuring from the dominant species. The commentators struggled to find words to describe what they had just witnessed. Lisa stood over her fallen opponent, breathing hard but victorious. She had done what everyone said was impossible. She had defeated a champion warrior using nothing but an ancient blade and techniques that the galaxy had never seen. Supreme. Chancellor Theron's voice cut through the noise. The human is victorious. Gorthnak of the volcanic worlds has been defeated. The words seemed to echo through the arena, and Lisa could feel the shock rippling through the crowd. This was not supposed to happen. The natural order of the Empire was supposed to be maintained With each species staying in its assigned place dot, as Lisa walked off the arena floor, she noticed something that gave her hope. In the servant sections of the stands, beings who had been oppressed for generations were cheering. They had seen one of their own rise up and challenge the established order. For the first time in centuries, they had hope, but Lisa also noticed the angry faces in the sections reserved for the dominant species. They were not happy about what had just happened. The human victory had upset the careful balance of power. That kept the Empire's stable dot in the preparation area. Keeper Zenth was waiting for her with medical supplies. "That was remarkable," he said quietly. "I have never seen anything like it in all my years of keeping records." "It was just the beginning," Lisa replied, cleaning her katana carefully. "The real test comes next. You realize what you have done?" Zenth asked. "You have shown the entire galaxy that humans are not the weak species they believed. The Empire's leaders will not be pleased." Lisa nodded. She understood the implications of her victory. By defeating Gorthmak, she had proved that humanity deserved more respect than they had been given. But she had also made powerful enemies who would not want to see the established order challenged. The next day, security footage of the fight was being broadcast across the galaxy. Military strategists from dozens of species analyzed Lisa's movements, trying to understand how she had defeated such a powerful opponent. They found something that disturbed them deeply. Humans were not just another species with different technology. They were something new, something that had never existed in the galaxy before. They were a species that had survived by adapting and innovating, by finding new ways to overcome obstacles that seemed impossible. Lisa's victory sent shockwaves through the Empire's government. Emergency meetings were held as leaders tried to understand what this meant for the future. If humans could defeat their champions in combat, what did that say about the Empire's power structure? But the victory also inspired others. On worlds across the galaxy, members of oppressed species began to whisper about the human warrior. The news of Lisa's victory spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. On every world in the Empire, beings huddled around communication devices to watch the impossible footage. A human warrior had defeated Gorthmak the Destroyer, one of the most feared champions in the galaxy. In the Empire's capital, Supreme Chancellor Theron paced in his private chambers, his ancient mind struggling to process what had happened. He had ruled for over 1,000 years, maintaining the careful balance of power that kept the Empire stable. The human victory threatened to upset everything he had built. "How did this happen?" he demanded of his advisors. "Humans are supposed to be weak, barely above animals in intelligence. How did one of them defeat a volcanic world's champion?" General Krex, the military leader of the Draconian forces, stepped forward. "Our intelligence about humans was incomplete, Chancellor. We focused on their lack of advanced technology and their small physical stature. We ignored their history of warfare and adaptation." "And fix it," Theron snarled. "I want complete files on human military capabilities. I want to know everything about their fighting techniques, their weapons, their strategies. This cannot happen again." Meanwhile, Lisa was preparing for her next match in the small quarters she had been assigned. The victory over Gorthmak had bought her some respect, but she knew the real challenges were still ahead. The Empire would not make the same mistake. Twice a soft knock interrupted her meditation. She opened the door to find the tree-like janitor she had met after the opening ceremony. His bark-like skin looked even more weathered than before, and his leaf hair rustled with nervous energy. "Warrior Martinez," he whispered, "I bring news from the servant quarters. Word of your victory has spread to every corner of the galaxy. My people are speaking of hope for the first time in centuries." Lisa felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. She had not just been fighting for humanity in that arena. She had been fighting for every species that had been pushed down and forgotten by the Empire's power structure. "There is more," the janitor continued. The Empire's leaders are frightened. They have called emergency meetings with their military commanders. They know that your victory has changed something fundamental. What do you mean? Lisa asked. For 300 years, my people have accepted our place as servants because we believed we were weak. But if humans can challenge the champions of the Empire, perhaps we are not as helpless as we thought. Lisa understood what he was saying. Her victory had not just been about one fight. It had been about proving that the Empire's hierarchy was not carved in stone, that the lesser species could rise up and demand better treatment. The next day, Lisa faced her second opponent in the tournament. Zarathal of the Mentari Collective was completely different from Gorthmak. Where the volcanic warrior had relied on brute force and heat, the psychic warrior used her mind as a weapon. Lisa had studied the Mentari fighting style as much as possible in her limited time. They could lift objects with their thoughts, create force fields with their minds, and even attack an opponent's brain directly. Many warriors had been defeated by Mentari psychics without ever being touched physically. The arena was even more crowded than it had been for the first fight. Beings from across the galaxy wanted to see if the human's victory had been luck or skill. The betting odds were still against Lisa, but they were not as extreme as they had been before. Zarathel entered the arena floating 3 feet above the ground, her pale blue skin glowing with psychic energy. She wore no armor and carried no weapons, because her mind was both her shield and her sword. Her species had been using psychic powers for thousands of years, perfecting techniques that could crush opponents without physical contact. The human warrior will face a different kind of challenge today, Supreme Chancellor Theron announced. Mental combat requires more than physical skill. Let us see if primitive minds can stand against evolved psychic abilities. The fight began with Zarathul attempting to enter Lisa's mind directly. This was the standard Mentari opening move, designed to disorient and confuse opponents before destroying them psychically. Most warriors fell to this attack within seconds, but Lisa had prepared for this moment. Her grandmother had taught her meditation techniques that were designed to focus the mind and block out distractions. She had spent years learning to control her thoughts and emotions, skills that her ancestors had developed over centuries of warfare. Instead of being overwhelmed by the psychic attack, Lisa felt her mind become perfectly calm and clear. She could sense Zarathul's presence trying to invade her thoughts, but it was like trying to grab water with bare hands. The human mind slipped away from the psychic assault, remaining free and focused. Zarathul's glowing eyes widened with surprise. She had never encountered a mind that could resist her initial attack so completely. She increased the power of her psychic assault, pouring more energy into the mental battle. Lisa began to move forward, walking calmly across the arena floor toward her floating opponent. She was using a meditation technique called moving stillness that allowed her to maintain perfect mental clarity while in motion. Her grandmother had taught her that a calm mind was the most powerful weapon any warrior could possess. The psychic warrior tried a different approach, using her telekinetic powers to lift chunks of the arena floor and hurl them at Lisa. The heavy metal pieces flew through the air like missiles, moving faster than most beings could dodge. But Lisa was not most beings. She moved through the storm of flying debris like a dancer, her body flowing around the obstacles with impossible grace. She was using techniques that combined Aikido with parkour, treating each thrown object as just another part of the environment, to work with rather than against. Zarathel's confidence began to crack. The Mentari had always dominated through superior mental discipline and psychic power. They had never faced an opponent who could match their mental control while also possessing superior physical abilities. Lisa continued her advance, drawing her katana as she moved. The blade seemed to sing as it cut through the air, its ancient steel gleaming with reflected light. She was getting closer to her opponent with each step, and Zarathul was running out of options. In desperation, Psychic Warrior attempted her most powerful attack. She gathered all her mental energy and tried to crush Lisa's mind with pure force. The psychic blast was so powerful that it created visible waves in the air around the arena, but Lisa had been preparing for this moment. She used a technique her grandmother had called the empty mind, completely clearing her thoughts and emotions until there was nothing for the psychic attack to grab onto. The mental assault passed through her consciousness like wind through an empty room. At the same moment, Lisa struck with her katana. The blade moved in a perfect arc, guided by instinct and training rather than conscious thought. Zarathul tried to create a force field to block the attack, but her psychic defenses were weakened by the failed mind assault. The ancient steel cut through the psychic barrier as if it were made of glass. The katana found its mark, and Zarathul fell from her floating position to the arena floor. Defeated. The crowd erupted in chaos. 2 victories in a row was no longer luck or coincidence. The human warrior had developed techniques that could overcome even the most advanced alien abilities. The impossible was becoming routine. Lisa stood over her fallen opponent, breathing hard, but victorious once again. She had proven that human mental discipline could match even the psychic powers of the Mentari. The katana in her hands had once again tasted victory against impossible odds. But as she left the arena, Lisa knew that her greatest challenges were still ahead. The Empire's leaders would not allow her to continue disrupting their carefully maintained order. They would send their most powerful champion next, someone who would be prepared for everything she had shown so far. In the servant quarters of the tournament facility, word of Lisa's second victory spread like wildfire. Beings who had been oppressed for generations began to whisper about revolution. If a human could defeat the Empire's champions, perhaps the time had come to demand better treatment for all the lesser species. On worlds across the galaxy, underground resistance movements that had been dormant for centuries began to stir. The human warrior had given them something they had almost forgotten: hope for a better future. Supreme Chancellor Theron watched the footage of Lisa's victory with growing alarm. The human was not just winning fights, she was inspiring others to question the Empire's authority. This was far more dangerous than any single warrior could be. Send Korath the Destroyer to face her next, he commanded his advisors. The Bruthan warrior has never been defeated in combat. He will end this rebellion before it can spread further. General Krex nodded, but his expression was troubled. Chancellor, our analysis of the human's fighting techniques shows something disturbing. She is not just using one style of combat. She seems to be combining dozens of different martial arts into something entirely new. What are you saying? Theron demanded. I am saying that humans may be more dangerous than we realized. Their entire species appears to have been shaped by constant warfare and adaptation. They have developed fighting techniques that our champions have never encountered. Theron's ancient eyes glowed. The day of the final battle arrived with tension that could be felt across the entire galaxy. Every major news network was broadcasting the tournament, and billions of beings had stopped their normal activities to watch. This was no longer just a sporting event. This had become a moment that would define the future of the Galactic Empire. Lisa stood in her preparation chamber, going through her final rituals. She had cleaned and sharpened her katana until the blade gleamed like silver. Fire. She had meditated until her mind was as calm as still water. She had stretched and exercised until her body was perfectly ready for combat. But she knew that all her preparation might not be enough. Korath the Destroyer was unlike any opponent she had faced before. The massive Bruthan warrior had conquered entire star systems. His people had never known defeat in battle, and he personally had killed over 1,000 enemies in single combat. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Lisa opened it to find an unexpected visitor. Supreme Chancellor Theron himself stood in the hallway, flanked by guards, but appearing to be alone for this conversation. "Human warrior," Theron said, his ancient voice carrying the weight of 1,000 years of authority. "I have come to make you an offer." Lisa studied the most powerful being in the galaxy. Theron was old beyond human understanding, and his species had ruled the Empire since its founding. For him to come to her personally meant that her victories had truly shaken the foundations of his power. "What kind of offer?" Lisa asked. "Withdraw from the tournament now, and I will grant humanity a higher status within the Empire. Your people will no longer be forced to work in the mines and factories. You will be given better worlds to live on, more freedom to govern yourselves." Lisa considered this offer carefully. It would improve life for millions of humans throughout the galaxy. Her people would no longer be treated as barely intelligent animals. It was more than she could have hoped for when she first accepted the tournament invitation. "And if I refuse?" she asked. Theron's eyes glowed with cold fire. "If you face Korath and lose, humanity will be punished for your arrogance. Your species will be reduced to the lowest possible status. Your people will suffer for generations because of your pride." Lisa felt the weight of this decision crushing down on her. She could accept the offer and guarantee a better life for her people. Or she could risk everything on one final battle, knowing that defeat would bring terrible consequences. But as she thought about it, Lisa realized that accepting the offer would mean accepting the Empire's right to decide humanity's fate. It would mean acknowledging that some species were naturally superior to others. It would mean betraying all the oppressed beings across the galaxy who were counting on her to prove that the established order could be challenged. "I refuse," Lisa said quietly. "The tournament will continue." Theron's expression did not change, but Lisa could sense his disappointment and anger. "You are making a mistake that your entire species will pay for. Korath will show no mercy." "Then neither will I," Lisa replied, her hand resting on her katana's handle. The Supreme Chancellor left without another word, and Lisa knew that she had just made the most important decision of her life. She had chosen to risk everything for the chance to prove that the Empire's hierarchy was wrong. The arena was more crowded than it had ever been in the tournament's history. Beings from across the galaxy had traveled to Nexus Prime to witness what many believed would be the most important battle in centuries. The betting odds had shifted dramatically over the course of the tournament, but Korath was still favored to win. When Lisa entered the arena, she was surprised by the reaction from the crowd. The servant sections erupted in cheers that seemed to shake the very foundations of the Colosseum. Beings who had been silent and oppressed for generations were finally finding their voices. But the sections reserved for the dominant species were ominously quiet. Their representatives watched with cold anger as the human warrior, who had disrupted their comfortable order, prepared for her final battle. Korath, the destroyer, entered from the opposite side of the arena, and Lisa felt her breath catch in her throat. The Bruthan warrior was even more intimidating than she had imagined. He stood nearly 12 feet tall, with muscles that looked like they could crush starships. His armor was made from the metal of conquered worlds, and his weapons were legendary throughout the galaxy. "Citizens of the Empire," Supreme Chancellor Theron announced, "witness the final match that will determine the true order of our civilization. Korath the Destroyer, champion of 100 worlds, faces the human who has dared to challenge our ancient ways." The crowd fell silent as the two warriors faced each other across the arena floor. Lisa looked tiny compared to her massive opponent, but she stood straight and proud with her katana ready. "Begin," Theron commanded. Korath moved with surprising speed for such a large being, closing the distance between them in seconds. His warhammer came down with enough force to shatter mountains, aimed directly at Lisa's head. But Lisa was no longer the same warrior who had entered the tournament. She had learned from each battle, adapting and growing stronger. She flowed around Koreth's attack like water around a stone. Her movements so smooth, they seemed almost supernatural. The warhammer struck the arena floor with a sound like thunder, leaving a crater in the supposedly indestructible surface. But Lisa was already moving, her katana singing through the air as she struck at Koreth's exposed side. The ancient blade met the legendary armor of the Bruthan warrior, and for a moment the outcome hung in balance. Then the katana cut through the metal as if it were paper, drawing first blood from the supposedly invincible champion. Koreth roared with pain and anger, swinging his massive fist at Lisa. She ducked under the blow and struck again, her blade, finding gaps in his armor that should not have existed. She was fighting with a precision that went beyond human understanding. Guided by instincts that had been honed over thousands of years of warfare, the battle raged for what felt like hours. Koreth's strength was overwhelming, but Lisa's speed and adaptability allowed her to stay ahead of his attacks. She was using techniques that combined every martial art her species had ever developed, creating new combinations on the fly as the fight demanded. Gradually, Lisa began to gain the upper hand. Koreth's massive size, which had always been his greatest advantage, became a liability against an opponent who could strike from any angle and disappear before he could respond. His armor, designed to stop the most powerful weapons in the galaxy, could not protect him from a blade that cut through anything. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the impossible happened before their eyes. The invincible Koreth the Destroyer was being defeated by a human warrior with an ancient sword. The natural order of the Empire was crumbling in real time. Lisa's final strike was a move that her great-grandfather had learned from the greatest swordsman in human history. She feinted high, drawing Koreth's guard upward, then spun low and struck at the one point where his armor was weakest. The katana pierced through, and the mighty Bruthan warrior fell to his knees. The arena exploded in chaos. The servant sections erupted in cheers that seemed to shake the stars themselves. Beings who had been oppressed for centuries were finally seeing their oppressors' champions, defeated by one of their own. But the reaction from the dominant species was very different. Many of them were shouting in anger, demanding that the results be overturned. They could not accept that their carefully maintained order had been destroyed by a primitive human. Supreme Chancellor Theron stood slowly, his ancient face showing emotions that few beings had ever seen. "The human is victorious," he announced, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet arena. "By the ancient laws of the tournament, humanity's status in the Empire must be reconsidered." But even as he spoke, Lisa could see that some beings in the crowd were not going to accept this outcome peacefully. A revolution she had started was spreading beyond the arena, and the Empire's leaders would have to decide whether to honor their own laws or try to maintain their power through force. As Lisa left the arena, still carrying her katana, she was surrounded by representatives from dozens of oppressed species. They had seen what was possible when someone refused to accept their assigned place in the galaxy's hierarchy. "What happens now?" asked the tree-like janitor who had become her friend. Lisa looked up at the stars, visible through the arena's transparent dome. "Now we find out if the Empire is strong enough to change, or if we have to tear it down and build something better." The katana at her side had tasted the blood of 3 champions and drunk the dreams of an entire galaxy. Lisa Martinez had entered the tournament as a representative of a lesser species. She was leaving as the catalyst for a revolution that would reshape the stars themselves. The Empire had mocked her when she first drew her blade. Now they would learn the true power of humanity's refusal to surrender. The galaxy would never be the same again. And that was exactly what Lisa had hoped for from the very beginning. Hope had returned to the oppressed, and no force in the universe could put it back in its cage. The revolution had begun with a single human warrior and an ancient sword, but it would end with freedom for every being brave enough to reach for it.